Be live on Facebook. It says preparing your webinar for your YouTube live stream. And here we are. Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwantner, and welcome to our webinar. We're going to be live on Facebook. So we have a little technical thing. It says preparing your webinar for your YouTube live stream. And so we're going to stop that stream because there's an echo that doesn't work. So hi, my name is Gerhard Schwantner, and welcome to our webinar. Today we talk about a very important subject, how to transition a Salesforce to virtual selling. And I'd like to introduce Tom Stanfill. He's the founder and CEO of Aslan Training, and also Mark Lamson. He's president of Aslan Training. Thank you for—
Hey everyone. Thanks for having us, Gerhard.
Hi, Gerhard. Thank you.
So, Mark, why don't we start with you? How are you seeing this pandemic impact sales organizations?
Yeah, so it's a wide range. I think when we look at there's a difference by industries, and I think we're looking at two types of industries, or two categories being affected by the virus and the shutdown in terms of demand. There's denied demand and there's deferred demand. So some of the investment bankers are saying that certain industries, restaurants, hospitality, cruises, travel, is denied demand. They're not going to recoup what's being lost, and they're in a very different state. And if you're calling on those industries, it's a difficult place to sell to. On the other hand, there's other industries that are in the deferred demand category. So we might think that certain industries are going to rebound. They talk about consumer products, for example. If you have your washing machine break today, you might not buy a new washing machine, but you're going to buy one in July or August or whenever that is, hopefully sooner. On the other hand, if you have it break in July, you're still going to buy one. So there's deferred demand and denied demand, and it's a thing for all companies to look at what industries they're selling into. In terms of what's really going on, when we talk to leaders, and I know there's a lot of leaders that are joining us, one of the big issues that leaders are wrestling with is what to do with the salesperson's compensation and quota. And so what we're seeing is a range from cutting quotas to trying to help reps, to really, I think the most common answer is we're cutting salaries of sales reps. So whatever sales rep salary they get, we're seeing cuts of around 20% to the fixed income, and I know that their commission is going to be hurt as well, but they're trying to sort of stay in business and I think sort of make it through this. And the problem is really, when I talk to people, it's the uncertainty of when the end or the rebound is. If it's the stimulus packages are going out for small businesses, for large businesses, there's a lot of momentum behind 8 weeks. We can cover payroll for 8 weeks. And so I don't know where the 2 months comes from, but when it starts to go deeper than that, I think you're going to see a shift in that. On the sales side, though, when we get to the leaders and talk about comp and quota, salespeople are connecting more. People are home. People are in their home office. They're answering the phone. They might not be doing as much. They're certainly not traveling as much. And so the connection rates are actually going up. And that's a good thing if you have something to offer that's helpful, something that people need. And I know, Tom, you're going to talk a little bit about what that really means and how we're selling virtually. But businesses are telling people are connecting. And the last thing I'll say, Gerhard, is we're seeing a lot of people helping each other. People and businesses saying, here's something for free. Here's something to use. It should help you. It might help you. And if it does, great. And when we get through this together, if it makes sense to continue or to pay later or to pay something, we'll sort of worry about that then, which I think is great. I think it's great that it's unfortunate that crisis has to come to bring out the best in humans and people, but we're for sure seeing that. At Aslan, we're trying to do the same thing. This is not, we've been in business for 26 years. We've had 9/11. We've had 2008. We've had other economic situations happen, and we're in it for the long term. And so all we can do is communicate to our employees that transparently what we know and what we have, and we just say we're going to tell you what we know when we know it, and hopefully we'll be on the other side.
For those people that just joined us, or those people that are tuning in on YouTube Live, we're speaking with Tom Stanfield, the founder and CEO of Aslan, and also Mark Lamson, the president of Aslan Training. What is the most important thing, Mark, that you can do to sell in this environment, or should you even sell at all?
Yeah, selling's always is an option. Tom, I think you have some good input on, how to really make that decision.
Well, yeah, I had an interesting conversation. I think captured it well yesterday. I asked him, I said, to your point, I was talking to him about, what's happening in the market. What is he seeing? And he captured it perfectly. He said, people's hair is on fire right now. They don't need conditioner. They need a bucket of water. And so I think the key word is, are you essential? That's a buzzword. Everybody's talking about, are you essential? You got to be, the only thing that's open is essential. And so I think reps need to figure out a way to be essential. So the people are asking, should we sell? Should we not sell? It really comes down to motive. If you can help and you can solve some of their existing problems right now, you're being self-centered if you don't call them. Right. So it's all about motive, and it's all about how you can serve. How can you have a bucket of water because they need one right now. So it's kind of shifting from thinking that you're an ambulance chaser to putting yourself as an ambulance driver. But if you can't figure out how to get them to where they're going to go, stop and figure that out before you call. A great example of that is talking to one of our large pharmaceutical clients, and they're working with veterinarians who are losing customers because of telemedicine, because they can't go to the vet. So they're buying all their stuff online. So guess what these reps are doing? They're trying to figure out how to help the vets get into telemedicine. Great example of being a solution for them right now and serving.
And I think it's, in essence, we're going to talk about three things. One is the right mindset in the situation. Mm-hmm. Second, the right skill set for the challenges that are totally new. Nobody has a playbook. And third, we're going to talk about the tool set. So, Tom, let's talk about how should we teach veterans to make the transition, or should they have waited out?
Mark and I were debating this as we were preparing for this call, and we both believe virtual selling, as they say, is here to stay. I think people, kind of like what we think may have impact on the travel industry as a whole, is that people are going to realize, hey, we got more done, or got a lot done while we were home or remote, or we traveled less. So I think there's going to be a shift to not 100% remote or virtual selling, but I do think these are skill sets that are going to be permanent. We're going to all have to learn how to lead, video conferencing, make virtual presentations, use the phone more. It just makes sense. And I think this is going to be a nice lab to prove that. So I think the veterans are going to have to make the shift, right? The ones that are used to touching base, running their routes, stopping into the customers, walking in, not really with a purpose, I think that they're going to have to shift on how they sell. So I think it's here to stay. So I think they're going to have to make the transition or retire.
Well, I think it's a decision that veterans are going to have to make. And I think, the politically correct word here is veterans, but for those of us who have been selling for a fair amount of time, those of you who are listening, and Gerhard and Tom, I won't put you in certain demographic categories, but, some of us drove a Ford Taurus. We had a milk crate in the back of our car with our brochures and our folders, and we, taped the paper receipts and we mailed them into the office for our expense reports. And, to Tom's point, it's here to stay. It's everything right now. Yeah, we're going to go back to seeing customers, but a lot of people will be open to it. Here's the important point I would make about veterans. When I talk to veterans, and when I've talked to them before the pandemic, they want to go see their customers because that's the right thing to do. Customers want to see me. They want me to show up and be there for them. Today, and that may or may not have been true. Today, customers want to see you virtually. It's instantly shifted overnight. Customers' willingness, tolerance, ability, and realization that we can be very effective over the phone or over the internet is dramatically changed the landscape. And it's really a veteran or anyone's decision whether or not they want to embrace that.
Well, everything has shifted to virtual because people now have a virtual happy hour. And I've been invited to 2 or 3 already, and it's a lot of fun where people come with a drink and they talk about life in general and the food they prepare, or they introduce you to their dogs and their pets. And so my grandson had his 9th birthday, and the whole family came together, and we did it over Zoom. And he was having a cake. He was sitting in LA, but family members participated from all over the country.
Yeah, we're having ours tonight.
We do. Ours are Thursdays. If you want to come to my Zoom room on Thursday nights at 5 Eastern, and the benefit, there's always a benefit, Gerhard. The benefit of the virtual happy hours is if you get into one of those conversations that you just don't want to be in, it's easier to get out of the conversation. It's just much easier. So there's definitely benefits to virtual.
Right. And the fun thing is that you can do it with anybody anywhere in the world. People in Europe or in India or in Singapore, in Australia, we are all in the same boat. We're all in this together. We want to connect and find a solution. So let's go back to the challenges, Tom. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the biggest challenges that sales organizations face?
Well, you mentioned it. I think the threefold. It's tools, which Mark, hopefully we'll get to that in a little bit. There's emotional challenges and there's advanced skills. And I think I'd like to talk probably first about the emotional challenge, because if the desire or belief that they can be successful, if your reps can't be successful, isn't in place, then really everything else is fruitless. So I think we have to start with that. We have to make sure, and I think the data that Mark shared originally about some of the numbers that people want to meet and people are being successful. I think we need to start with, do you believe that you can be successful selling right now? And so I think we have to really work hard as leaders to make sure, hey, this is what it looks like. People are successful. This is what they're doing. You can do this, so that there's that, confidence. I also think we need to change what we measure, right? I think we need to be much more short term. Instead of focused on, hey, you got to lose 20 pounds, let's just focus on today, I'm going to walk 3 miles, or today I'm going to consume this much calories. Because I think right now, if we're focused too long term and we're saying, hey, you're not going to hit your quota, or here's what your quota needs to be, just hit it, then I think people can get discouraged. I think we just got to break it down. I remember doing this when early in my sales career. I based my goal, especially when I started Aslan, I was in the basement. I didn't have a brochure. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I based my success each and every day by hitting my little productivity goals. And I think that's really key right now.
It requires a lot of discipline because there are a lot of distractions that are under the disguise of opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think another thing related to advanced skills is really shifting how we think about selling. We talk a lot at Aslan about receptivity, and we believe, and it's been proven, that the receptivity of the audience has more impact on your ability to influence than your message. Another way to talk about it, if the soil's not fertile, right, no matter what happens, no matter how the quality of the seed, the plant's not going to grow, right? So the soil's got to be fertile, and you got to have a quality seed. You got to have a great message, but you also have a receptive audience. So the customer's willingness to listen is actually more important than your ability to position your solution. So I think that's really important, that we got to shift, because if people are emotionally unreceptive, which people right now are very distracted, they're worried, they're in fear, they're getting a million emails a day from everybody talking about COVID. And so we got to first figure out, how do we create a fertile soil? How do we create that receptivity? And then we can deliver our message. So we kind of need to add another dimension to that.
So Mark, let's go back to you. What are the biggest differences to selling virtually? And I want to preface that by a conversation I had this morning with a company that has 250 sales reps, and that just released a COVID-19 work-at-home survival kit, where they actually taught them how to do an online presentation, because none of them has done it before.
Yeah, we mentioned people are just more available, but to Tom's point, the receptivity problem, which is something we've talked about for a while, is I think it's 3 times as difficult now to get someone's attention. So someone's picking up the phone, but to get someone's attention, to get them to be open to your idea, because Tom, the point you made earlier, we're selling conditioner, but they need a bucket of water because people's hair is on fire. And you're right. The distractions of just, I need to go down and see my governor at 1 o'clock to see what the briefing is. And I'm worried. I'm worried about the future. And so it's easier to get a meeting, or it's easier to talk to somebody, but maybe it's harder to get them open to your idea. And the antidote, for lack of a better term, to someone being unreceptive is we talk about 2 P's. We talk about priority and pressure. So the customer has to understand that they're the priority versus I have a sales rep calling me who's struggling to make their quota, who's trying to do anything they can to make it for the next 8 or 12 weeks, and that they really understand my business. There's a much higher, I guess, importance, Gerhard, on empathy in selling. And there's a big difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is what we have when we have a friend lose a loved one. We say, I'm sorry for your misfortune. I'm sorry for that. But empathy is a situation where I can really understand what you're going through, and I can share that I understand that. We have the most, I guess, the best time to make a positive out of something negative, which is the coronavirus. The positive is we all have a great opportunity to really understand the idea of empathy in selling, because we are all in this together. Everybody, you're calling customers, and the customer is probably home. They're worried about their business, their job, their compensation. They're distracted because if they have children or other people that are home that are not usually home during the day, they're having a hard time on the internet because they're sucking up all the other bandwidth because they're using videos. And then at the end of the day, when I need to go out and have that actual happy hour and get a nice dinner, I can't because everything is closed. And it's one of the first times where everybody understands what the other person is going through. And so I think the first thing is to really have empathy, to really not just, I got a veiled email the other day. It was an email that I gotten before from a sales rep, a bad email, and said, here's what we're selling and here's why. And it changed up front. It says, during the crisis, you may want to consider this. And it was the same exact email that I got 4 months ago with a different sort of tagline. That's not empathy. That's nothing. And so we really need to understand empathetically where the other person is and where we can serve, not sell. And Tom, I'll let you pick this up in a second. The only other thing I'll share is one of the best responses we've had recently as a company is one of our reps just wrote an article. He posted an article and about Dr. Fauci and about this idea of receptivity and how people are receptive and unreceptive, and just compared it. And it was an article. It was just an article designed to help sellers. And all he did was send it to a few of his clients. Every client he sent it to, the VP of sales and the VP of learning took it and sent it to their team and says, this is helpful, this is important, and they were so appreciative. And so is that selling? I don't know. There was no money changed hands, but it was certainly a way to serve the client. And again, you have to sort of be in this for the long term. I don't know, Tom, I know you have some other ideas on that topic.
Well, I just want to add just kind of a practical application to that is the best way to be empathetic, which is what the rep that Mark's speaking about, is to lead with what's on their whiteboard, right? So if you picture their whiteboard, what does it say right now? If you know your customers or the title, the profile of the people that you serve, get to know what's on their whiteboard. What they're all struggling with pretty much the same thing. Either if you talk to somebody on the inside who can tell you specifically what it says, or generally what's on their whiteboard. The best way to be empathetic is not say, hey, I'm calling you, it's COVID-19, I hope you're okay, here to serve. It's about, you have this problem and I want to talk to you about that. Especially if you're prospecting, because if you're prospecting and you're being empathetic to somebody you don't know, right, then that can come across as obviously disingenuous. So I completely agree with and echo Mark's point about being empathetic, which means you feel what they feel, right? But the best way to feel what they feel is to feel the pain that they're in.
Right.
Not, hey, I feel what you feel. Can we talk about my stuff?
So you're talking about emotional intelligence. You need to be able to read the other person's emotional signals and shift from pitching to helping and understanding. People want to be understood. People want to be heard. And also from a sort of strategy perspective, I would recommend to think about the structure of your offer.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way you can lower the risk? Because budgets are hard to come by. So you need to build in more, massive value into your offer and maybe better terms. And to me, a crisis is nothing but a wake-up call for creativity.
Right.
You want to come up with fresh ideas that people haven't heard yet. And what I see is a tremendous amount of innovation all over the country, especially in the medical field. Mm-hmm. Right now there's a COVID-19 test kit that gives you the results in 10 minutes or in 15 minutes. And there are probably about 80 different manufacturers that are delivering that. So there's Salesforce.com is helping with tracing the contacts and creating a database. So there's a lot of innovation going on, and you want to be part of that. You want to be proactive,
right?
Not allow your competition to beat you to that. So to me, it is a wake-up call for creativity. So,
and I know we're talking to sales leaders, and they may play other roles in their organizations, and we're talking about selling. But I agree, Gerhard. There's a good list of companies. Uber is one of them, that were companies that came out of the 2008 recession. So all of a sudden, when this major economic change happens, it provides an opportunity to dramatically change the way that we do business and we consume things. And so I would encourage the people on this webinar listening. This is where in your business can you drive. It's not about selling more of what you have or figuring out how you're going to secure more orders. It's about what really is most important, and what does the new normal look like on the other side. And I think from a sales perspective, the way that we're doing that, and the way that I've seen other companies do that with us, that sell to us, is, it depends on your business and the products and service of your business. We want to keep our people employed. We want to keep our company going. We want to grow. We want to develop new products. And so there are some things that are heavy on the labor intensive side. And so those are things that are hard to just give away for free, because you want to pay your people. There is some kind of economic movement that has to happen. But there's other things, candidly, that are less labor intensive, digital learning and things in the training space that are easier to say, why don't you have this now? Try this now. We want to be careful not to diminish value. We want to be careful that the customer who signed a large order for it 3 months ago says, geez, I should have gotten it for free. But I think everyone understands we're doing this now to help each other. And the conversation with true partners becomes a trust conversation. But internally we're saying serve now, pay later. And so if this helps you get through this crisis, if we're on the other side, obviously there's a cost. Obviously it makes sense to pay or continue or pick it back up. And we've had vendors come to us to offer that and say, we want to do some things for you, but maybe we'll do it at a fraction. We'll worry about it on the other side. So I think when we talk about selling virtually, Gerhard, you mentioned this, one of the transitions is how are we structuring the deal, so to speak? And that's very different, and it's got nothing to do with maybe being remote. It's just all about in this crisis that we're in.
I'd like to comment quickly though on what you're saying about the creativity. I think that was a really good point about both of you. I think the best place to spark creativity is to get to know your customer. When you spend time with no agenda and you get back to the whiteboard point, and you maybe as your leader, spend more time with your reps, spend more time with your customers, listening to what they're saying. That's the birthplace of creativity. That's what will lead us to the best solutions. It'll also lead to better emails. It'll lead to better introductions. It'll improve your social media. It'll improve your marketing. It's like, again, the better we can articulate the customer's point of view, the more successful we're going to be, whether we're developing products or we're selling.
So let's shift to the audience. We have about 120 people in the audience. They probably have a lot of questions. So type in your questions. We have a little bit of time for Q&A afterwards, but we may answer some on the fly. But let's go back to Tom.
Mm-hmm.
How does leadership develop and coach their team?
Yeah, that's I know there's a lot more advanced skills that we need to talk about, but obviously leaders are the key. Change happens one-to-one, and if we're going to see a shift in the ultimately the reps develop these skills, really the biggest impact on that is how the leaders coach and develop their team. I think the first thing I would like to just talk about context. When you think about what a coach needs to do, right? They need to teach. They need to diagnose, they need to make sure there's alignment to the gap, and there needs to be a development plan. Of those four things, the most difficult to do remotely is to diagnose or observe. So because to diagnose, I have to watch. So I think that's one of the things that I think people struggle with. We talked about our leaders the most is how do I diagnose what's going on? How do I observe the reps? Because if they're not, unless they're doing a virtual meeting like this, and they're presenting something, obviously they can record it. But if they can't ride with the customers unless they're not at home with them. So how do I do that? One of the little tips that we came up with recently is we create a simulation, or I was actually coaching one of our reps, where I was the customer, right? Obviously they were the sales rep. So we had a role play, and we recorded it on a cell phone, right? So we recorded it on his cell phone, and then we played it back, and then that was the coaching session. He coached himself, he assessed, and we came up with a development plan after that. So I think that's one thing to think about is how do you coach remotely?
Well, I think there is a huge opportunity for people who have coaching programs to revive their coaching program, put it virtually. There's a STAR program.
Right.
There are all kinds of tools that can be applied. And I think we need to spend more time on what you call sort of the emotional intelligence coaching and show certain vignettes and say, look at this and watch out for when the disconnect came up between the buyer and the seller.
Right.
You can record all the Zoom calls, you can analyze a few and use that as a coaching opportunity. Mm. We just got another question here. I'm a sales professional in the food service space. How do you demonstrate a product virtually? Good question.
Yeah, I'd love to field that because I'm writing an article about that right now. I think the number one thing I would say is that your visual should tee up what you want to say, not the visual tell the story. In other words, it should tee up what you want to say about it, not tell the story. So that's not the message, you're the message. So, because if you show the product with lots of data, lots of information, they're either just going to tune out, not read it, they can't see it. There's toggle back and forth. So there's also a framework that we teach that's really effective. And again, we kind of talked about this advanced skill. So what works face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball, where there's a lot more intimacy, doesn't necessarily work over the phone. You have to be excellent at communicating when you're communicating over the phone. Mm-hmm. So there's a framework of making sure that everybody listens to what you say, they embrace what you say. Now they may not end up buying, but it's the most effective way to communicate. And you look at the top community, the top TED Talks, they all follow this framework. The first thing to do, whatever you're going to talk about, whatever product, or even it's a point in your PowerPoint presentation, is to start with their problem. In other words, describe their world first. Describe the problem that they have related to what you're going to talk about. Another way to say that is if you can't begin the sentence with because you will probably lose them. Every time you begin the sentence with because you have this problem, or because you are expanding your facility, or because you just hired, or because you are running out of this, they will lean in. When you show people a picture of themselves, they will always look at it. So that is a guaranteed way to get their attention, whatever point that you're going to make. The second thing is you want to say something disruptive. Share with them about something they don't understand, about the best way to solve that problem. So number one, you have this problem. They all nod. And the better you can articulate the problem, the more they lean in. Second thing is you share something that breaks, hey, I didn't know that. Here's something that you need to know about that you didn't know, right? And then again, that gets them to lean in. Well, what do you mean by that? Those two things have nothing to do with your solution, right? That's all about them and what they need to know about to solve the problem. Then the third thing is you need to focus on what do you offer related to what you're talking about that no one else offers, whether it's how you offer it or a specific service, feature, benefit that you offer. So if you follow that process, always start with them and hit those three elements, right? Everything you say will resonate.
Another question while we are at it, it's really interesting what bubbles up here. How will our new reality change the type of person we need to hire in sales roles going forward? Thanks for asking. Mark, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I'm glad you're going to tackle that one, Mark.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me look at my notes. Yeah, I think so for sure. The quick answer, I guess, where I would go to first in terms of the new reality is if we are going to spend more time selling virtually, and we are going to spend more time selling virtually. Companies are going to realize, that we don't need to travel as much or get together as much, and there's more tolerance for doing things, from home, so to speak. So that drives two real easy to sort of pinpoint changes. Number one, working from home requires a much higher level of self-motivation and discipline, especially for people who are not used to doing that. When I've interviewed thousands of salespeople and I've heard them say, I love people, I love to be with people and help them. And that's great. And that's part of what salespeople should be motivated by. There's a lot of other things too. Working from home or spending more time at home, or they're going to spend 2 days a week in their home office, is very easy to get up late, not get dressed. You've seen all the sort of the basics, but the reality of it is their discipline at the end of the day determines how productive they were during the day, how many meetings or calls they made. And in reality, you can be more productive at home. You can talk to more customers. So I think the discipline motivation is one change. The other thing is, and I know we'll talk about in a few minutes, is technology. A technical aptitude, a higher aptitude is required. It's not just about, get Zoom and look in the camera and I'm looking at the right place. And so being able to develop that, we call it your online brand. Like, what do you look and feel and come across like behind a webcam? And so those are two things I think that sort of come out at me first, Gerhard. I'm not sure if you have anything to add, Tom, but I stalled long enough for you.
Well, you went first, so that was that made it a little easier.
Wait, Gerhard, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought Gerhard has another question.
I was going to answer that question and kind of tag on to what you're saying, because I'm seeing the question as well. I think I would add to that is the verbal ability, right? When you're communicating over the phone, it is almost all about what you say. Kind of back to what I said earlier. The visual doesn't tell the story, you do. So I think the ability, so questions I remember asking when I was hiring a bunch of inside sales reps early in my career, is I would just ask them to describe things to me, like their favorite vacation or their favorite food or their favorite restaurant, and how they would describe that and their ability to get me to see it and feel it, right? That's a skill, right, that you have to have when selling over the phone, which I think relates to the question I'm seeing here.
I want to add something that you said earlier, Tom, that deserves a little bit more attention, is the element of surprise. When you surprise people with something they don't expect,
right.
I think the conversation changes. And I want to surprise you guys is that's my granddaughter wearing a scarf. It breaks the ice.
I didn't
love it.
expect
I
that.
love it.
I didn't
I
expect
love
that.
it.
Right. So think about surprises. Here's another quick question. I'm also in the business of selling taste of food, high-ticket cookware sold to end consumer. I can't convey taste, aroma, how to close the first-time demonstration product virtually. So that is a tricky thing because cooking is a magical experience. So my immediate suggestion would be to show videos, because Zoom allows you to actually build in videos and have them queued up and say, here's a 20-second clip on how to cook this. And you demonstrate it not in reality, but in virtual reality by playing a video clip. What do you think of that?
I think it's a great idea. Mark, I want to say something about that, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to just say that, and I don't have much experience selling food or high-end consumer, but I definitely have experience consuming food, so I can speak as a consumer. And when you're talking about, I think I heard the question kind of about high-end, sort of, on that level, and I think a lot of times in this, if I'm being specific to this space, right, it's about why are people eating that? It's not for the nutritional value or to sustain. It's the feeling. There's an emotion invoked when I taste something, when I pair wine and I pair a certain food. And so we can't explain taste, but we can certainly convey emotion, and we can sort of help take them back to a time when, this is what it makes me feel like. I remember the first time I had this amazing rosé paired with this faux gras, and it just sort of did, it just sort of made my eyes sort of blink. And again, I know I'm not a food salesperson, but the emotion is what you're trying to convey. And doing that verbally is harder, but it's about sharing sort of word pictures, right? You're trying to create analogies for people and just trying to give them more insight to get their emotional side of their brain on versus the logical side about how it tastes and why it tastes and the fat content or whatever else it might be.
And I may add to that is you use a little bit of NLP as well. So instead of you describing a certain taste, a certain food experience or a wine pairing experience, so when you sell high-end cookware, you want to tap into your client's memory and ask the client, when was it the last time you smelled a real good roast beef? Describe that experience. Was it at your mother's house, your grandmother's house? So then you connect them with that feeling. And then you say, well, here's an idea on how to recreate that for yourself, because you want to honor the memories of the family.
Yeah, I think that's great. Gerhard, can we take the food questions towards the end here? Because I haven't had lunch yet, and I'm trying to think about the time that I smelled roast beef, and now I'm getting hungry. So
you sold up. Yeah, I want to comment on that as well, because Mark kind of teed this up. But to get people, that we talk about a formula at Aslan, to get people to act, it's logic plus emotion equals action. So they need to emotionally, and we're all saying the same thing. It's logic plus emotion equals action. Logic's easy, right? You can address the logic. The hard part is the emotion. And so as Mark mentioned, word pictures are key. If you can come up with an analogy to connect to something that they already know, right, and feel, and then you can then make an analogy of what you're offering, that's the best way to make a connection. That Mark mentioned.
Right.
I had a rep.
We have a ton of questions, and I think we should dive in, and then we finish up with technology. So we have about 20 minutes left, and we want to use it as productively as we can. So I work for a well-known school supply company, with schools being closed for the indefinite future, and most decision makers are not available. What do I do in the meantime? And I think that's a real hard question.
Yeah, that's a tough question. The truth is, there's selling school supplies. I'll just speak transparently. I believe that's going to be a denied demand industry. There are kids home. They are not going to school and using pencils and paper and bulletin boards and all the other things that are being used at the school. And so my answer probably is less to the individual rep and more hopefully to the business that says now that business is selling to schools, the school needs and the school supplies are dramatically different than they were just 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago when this started. In the meantime, again, I can't speak to every situation and what percentage of compensation people have salary versus commission. But what's never going to hurt a sales rep when business is off, the demand is denied, or it's deferred for a long time and there's uncertainty, is serving your customers. Because although their hair is on fire, and I can speak for my kids and the administrators at schools, and they're trying to figure out distance learning and what's going on and all the problems, if you've been in this space, here's one of the things that sellers can do that I think they overlook this. What you do for a living is you sell to schools and you're talking to schools, and the people you're talking to are trying to solve problems in their district that are being solved in other districts while we speak. And you are the common connection between those. And so one of the things we've seen successful in several spaces, not just in schools, is where you're figuring out what are the main problems, how do we get the kids, how do we get the tools home, how do we grade tests, how do we take care of all the things that are going away from school, and try to figure out who has solved those and offer that information or offer to connect those people. And so now what you're selling is not the actual supply, but the solution to the problems they're really solving. Is that going to pay your commission for the next 2 or 3 months? Probably not. It just isn't, unless there's something that's changed in your business. But in terms of the right thing to do and the hope that we're out of this sooner rather than later, for sure, I think it's the time to just connect to people who have been your customers for a long time and try to help as best you can. I don't know if that's the best answer, but that's my initial answer that I would tell my reps to do.
Awesome. Tom, there's a question for you. How much pushback are you getting from the sales team to going virtual? And is the impact showing in sales performance, impacting your next moves in both hiring and training?
So is there a pushback on going virtual? No, there's not a pushback. I think and Mark probably has more insight in this than I do, but I think the pushback is back to the beliefs is who can we serve right now and what is the message, and kind of piggybacking on what Mark was talking about with selling to schools. If it's sometimes, and this may not be an option right now, but what we're working on is how do we create new solutions based on where our customer is right now. In other words, we sold conditioner and we're trying to create some buckets of water right now. And so that's what our focus is. And I think where we're able to do that, there's not a pushback. But I think it's about us working together with a realistic viewpoint of who needs what we offer, or what can we offer that solves certain problems, and partnering with the rep versus get on the phone, make calls, make it happen. We're interacting with them more, and they're giving us feedback, telling us what they see, and so that's really our approach. Mark, hiring, we're not really hiring right now. I think that was part of the question. The last thing I would say, training, and I think that was part of the question, is we see now is the best time to train, right? This is a good time to invest in our people, take them off the phone if they're not as productive as they need to be, and some of the businesses are less productive than others, and really develop them. Work on understanding what's on the customer's whiteboard, work on their how they build value, position the solution, make presentations, et cetera.
Another really amazing question is how much of my business in the industrial space requires meetings and inspections of physical equipment. How do we approach that discussion with customers as we navigate the uncertainty of COVID quarantine?
Inspection of physical equipment. Can they do? Yeah, the question. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I don't want to assume or guess what we mean by inspection of equipment and inspection of the equipment that I'm sending to you, or once it's installed, is there an inspection? I think that's a little bit difficult to answer. I think what's changing right now is, the movement of people from one place to another. So that's what's limiting. I can't move people, but people are set up in different places. So it might change who is doing the inspection. It might change, when we were talking earlier about sort of how do I demo something, how do we, instead of me coming to to your office and showing you a food service or a piece of equipment and inspecting that with you, I'm going to have to do things to get equipment in your hands and depend on UPS and FedEx and shipments or trucks or whatever, and have you do the inspection. So it's just about, I think, it's taking out the assumption that people can move and that people can't move. And so how do we move things to people to do the steps of the sales process that we need? And that may change a person's role. It may change, the customer's role to be the person who does the demo themselves.
Sorry for jumping in. I think that the model is really telehealth. Think about it. There are a number of telehealth tools that have been on the market for 5 to 7 years, where a professor or a doctor at Stanford University is diagnosing a patient that's somewhere in West Africa with a satellite link. And they have the diagnostic tools at the other end connected to the internet, and the doctor at the hospital can ask the assistant, do this. And it's the same with, I just heard yesterday of a telehealth service that actually gives people a COVID-19 testing kit to do at home.
Mm-hmm.
There's a company in Australia that has a rapid test kit that gives you the results in 10 minutes. And there are videos out there, and I've seen a news report, and that company now makes home care kits. They're not on the market yet, but there's so much innovation where we can learn from telemedicine and give the diagnostic abilities directly into the hands of the customer, and then you coach them over video.
Well, I know a lot of these answers are think about how to do this, but we are in a time where we're thinking about how to do things differently. And I think, Gerhard, your point about telehealth, there's been some places that have been there for some time. And so as salespeople, we can lean on those experiences and learn. I'll give you a very specific example. That the key is to say, because we're not, we say, well, we need to meet, or I need to see this, or I need to inspect this, or I need to demo this. But I would say, when we think about the 80-20 rule, 80% of the time, there's a few key questions or a few key things we're looking at to help decide. And one of those things is evident in the telehealth world. I'll share a quick personal story that brings this home. But we had my son fell on a skateboard, and he had a large bruise on his hip. And my wife and I were looking, and we read on the internet it's a hematoma, and that's bad. And we were getting ready to drive to the ER at 11 o'clock at night, and we said, time out. We used our telehealth service, and the doctor said, look, 80% of the time, he said, so we got a video. We took a picture. He said, show me a picture. He looked at it. He looked at the color. And he said, is it, he asked two questions. Is there pain at the knee or at the joint, at the hip? No, there's not. He says, does he have a fever? No, he doesn't. In that case, he's fine. He doesn't need to go to the ER. You can check with your regular doctor in 3 or 4 days if the swelling doesn't go down. So it's examples of how in the sales process can we ask some simple questions to have them, whether it be self-diagnose in coaching, or self-assess in sort of the sales process, or demo or inspect. How can we transfer our knowledge as the expert to the other person and do it on our behalf, since we can't be there?
And
It's hard.
another question that's very similar. We sell expensive capital equipment. Our prospects have come to the showroom to see the equipment in action. How do we compensate for this inability to do that? Tom?
Yeah, I really do think that we have to get better at verbally communicating what are I can't touch it, right? I can't see it. I mean, maybe I can see it. I probably can see it because you can show it to them in a virtual meeting, like in the format that we're in now. But I'm going to revisit this idea of word pictures. We have to come up with either stories or word pictures that get the emotional side of the brain to engage. I'll give you an example. One of the tough objections that a sales rep that I was working with gets is, well, you're from outside our industry. Like, that's an objection. You're from outside our industry, so how do you understand my industry? Here's an example of a word picture. The guy happened to be a baseball fan, and he happened to be a Houston Astros fan. So he said, you remember when the Houston Astros were on the front cover of Sports Illustrated in 2014 and they predicted that they would win the World Series? And the guy goes, yeah, he's nodding. So that's a great thing about word pictures. It's like you're telling him a story. He's going, yeah, I remember that. He's interested because it's about him. And he says, and they won the World Series when? He goes, 2017. He said, how? The guy goes, because they brought somebody from outside the industry and got him to look at baseball differently. Bingo. So that's a simple way to answer a really tough question, but everything about what you're selling, the reason that they're going to buy you versus somebody else or invest in something they didn't expect to invest is because they experienced the benefit. It's like retirement. You think about retirement, right? It's like everybody believes, I think 95% of people believe they should save for retirement, but 15% people actually save for retirement because they don't know what it feels like to be broke in 75. Well, as soon as you know what it feels like to be broke, I know I need to save, but as soon as you know what it feels like to be broke in 75, you will start saving, whether you're 20 or whether you're 50. And so that's the challenge of making these virtual presentations. Visuals, right, can show, right, and just demonstrate, but you've also got to develop the verbal. I'll give you one more example. We were working with a company who worked with us in 1997, and we were talking to them again in 2015. We showed them the picture of a mobile phone in 1997 and a picture of a mobile phone in 2017 or whatever the date was. And that was the way we got them to see those two differences. So just a couple ideas.
But there is also virtual reality. You know, last time I was in Toronto, I went into this play zone where you get a backpack and virtual reality helmet and everything and goggles.
Well, you got that perfect.
All of a sudden, you are in a Star Wars scene, you know, and you get attacked and you have a gun. You know, they have a Ghostbusters series. So I'm sure that, you know, let's say you sell a Caterpillar off-road, 300-ton truck or something like that. So you step into the cabin and look around and tell what it is.
I think that's coming for sure. And I'll just add one quick thing though to all these people saying, hey, how do the customers see or touch this? And I think all these things are true. The short-term reality is you're going to have to remove risk for the customer. The reason they want to come to the showroom and touch and feel and drive is before they make the commitment to deliver it. I want to make sure it's going to be okay. It depends on our discovery. It depends on us making sure it's a good match. But at some point, the only way we're going to keep our business going is we're going to have to make it easier for them to return it, change their mind, pay later, or do something. And that's just while we're waiting for the virtual reality tools and things to get better. That's something that I think we all have to consider at the sales and sales leader and company level.
That's a great point, Mark.
Well, we get a lot of interesting comments and questions. So I want to thank the audience, but we have one more question. What do we need to know about the tools to selling virtually?
Yeah, I'll take that question. There's certainly been, if you've looked at email, you have plenty of options to go and find the right tools, whether it be Zoom or GoToMeeting or WebEx or all the things that are out there. And so I think it's less about the actual tool, but it's more about just a couple of things from a technology perspective, or at least planning to work over technology. Number one, I don't think people think about their background and what's in the background and is distracting. I have someone that I've talked to a few times. He has a mirror behind him, which is great, except for there's a rest of the house on the mirror, and I see his family running around in the mirror in front of him. So think about your background and whether you have something still, like this is a good example. There's Tom, who's got sort of a still sort of image. It's kind of a backdrop of our marketing site. Gerhard, we talked about you and your climb to Mount Everest and sort of how that looks. There's some good virtual backgrounds, or whether there's sort of some distance from me to maybe a bookshelf. So background, I think, is important to establish Tom and I have talked about this, your online brand, how you how you dress and how you go into an office is now transferred to I did see an article about the amount of revenue on tops and coats is high, but pants have dropped off. Not that people aren't wearing pants, I hope, but they're just not buying new pants or new shoes. Right. They're just buying new shirts.
Yeah, that's great.
So your background, sound is an important piece. We as a company just have a bunch of $70 just Bluetooth headsets. I think something in your head versus throughout the air, you sound so much crisper and clearer. Yeah, I'm using a lapel microphone, but just the ability to connect better in sound. Lighting is an important thing, and just having a little extra light, not something in your face, not a window sort of at you, but just good ambient lighting, and check that out. The last thing I'd say is when you're talking, and this is the hardest thing I've seen salespeople do, and this is so sort of ultimately the other-centered test, is when you're talking to someone, I can either look at you on my screen, which is what I'm doing right now, except for you're on my screen, and I'm not looking at you to you. I'm looking at you to me. But when I look at you, I'm looking at the camera, which is a weird thing. Only reporters know how to do that, and that's a new technology-based skill we need to learn. My invention idea is I would want to take a 1-pixel camera and put it in the center of the screen so I can look at the screen. But until I make that invention, or someone on the call takes my idea, we have to learn to communicate and look at the camera. And the last point I'll make is whatever technology you have, it usually puts people in small bits and bytes around the screen. The most important thing we are losing in virtual selling is to see the person, their facial expressions, their body language, their lips, their eyes, and how they sort of move. And when they're this little tiny speck on your screen, you are going to miss all of that. The number one thing to do is learn how to look at the customer and put them as the full screen. Don't worry about how you look. Don't worry about anything else. Be able to see. And when you do that well, you can see most or all of the body language and say, hey, you seem to be hesitating, or you were going to say something, or what did you mean by that? And so that are just some, I'm not going to go through the list and all the things you need. You need a computer and a web sharing tool and a decent webcam and some lighting, but those are some real technical nuances that make all the difference in your presentation.
Well, thank you for sharing all your insights. This was really fascinating, and I wish we had another hour to go because we have so many interesting questions. I want to thank the audience for participating and really sticking with us and staying with us. This was so informative for me. I took notes, and I'm walking away with ideas for another article. Tom, I can't wait to see you publish yours. And Mark, what is your final suggestion? In one word, what should sales leaders think about to get through this crisis?
That's a great question. In one word, my honest answer, Gerhard, is if I had to pick one word, I'd say gratitude. Because when I have gratitude for all that I've been given and everything that's happened to me, and and you're still okay and you're safe, it allows you to get the stress out of your mind, and it allows you to worry about what you can influence, the circle of influence versus your circle of concern. When you're worried, when you're concerned about yourself, it's impossible to make the business decisions you need to navigate this. But when you start with gratitude and say, I'm thankful for what I have and I'll do the best with what I can do, it takes all that away and allows you to really put your best foot forward from a leader's perspective.
I'm very grateful, Mark, that you are so gracious. And thank you, Tom. And we will send everybody a link to the recording. We recorded it live on YouTube. So we'll share this again, and you can share it with everybody else.
Thanks, Gerhard.
Great. Thanks, Gerhard. Thanks, everyone.